Good evening, everybody. My name is Rosa Murray and I'm a member of the Scottish Laity Network. It's my privilege to welcome you tonight to the third evening of our Towards Pentecost 2023 programme with the overall theme of the signs of the Spirit. For whilst we look forward to celebrating the outpouring of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost, as followers of Jesus, we are also called to discern the signs of the Spirit in our world today. Today is the Feast of the Ascension, and we begin by reflecting on that event as described by Matthew.
The 11 disciples set out for Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had arranged to meet them. When they saw him, they fell down before him, though some hesitated. Jesus came up and spoke to them. He said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go, therefore, make disciples of all nations. Baptize them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teach them to observe all the commands I gave you. And know that I am with you always, yes, to the end of time."
To help us in our reflection on this Gospel, we offer some thoughts from the Spanish theologian José Pagola. Pagola says that Matthew clearly identifies the bold outlines of what must a guide to all of the disciples of Jesus, and what should be the characteristics that mark the Church in order to fulfill her mission.
Galilee is the starting point. Jesus summons them there. His resurrection should not lead them to forget what they experienced with him in Galilee. There he spoke to them of God in heartwarming parables. There they have seen him relieving suffering, bringing the forgiveness of God and welcoming the most forsaken. That is exactly what they must continue to pass on. There are believers among the disciples, and there are those who hesitate. The narrator is a realist. The disciples prostrate themselves. Doubtless they want to believe, but there are some who doubt and are undecided. Perhaps they are frightened and cannot grasp the meaning of it all. Matthew knows how weak the faith of the Christian communities is. If they could not trust in Jesus, their faith would soon be extinguished. Faith in the risen Christ does not arise spontaneously in us either today, just because we have listened from childhood to catechists and preachers. In order to be open to faith in Jesus' resurrection, we have to make our own journey. It's decisive not to forget Jesus, to love him passionately and to seek him with all our strength, but not in the world of the dead. We should seek the living one where there is life. If we want to meet the risen Christ, full of life and creative energy, we must look for him, not in a dead religion reduced to performance and observance of external laws and norms, but there where people live according to the Spirit of Jesus, welcomed by his followers with faith, with love, and with responsibility. We have to look for him not among divided Christians who engage in competitions that are unproductive and devoid of love for Jesus and of passion for the gospel. Rather, we should look for him where we keep building communities that put Christ at the center, because they know that where 2 or 3 are gathered together in his name, there is he in the midst of them.
Before we welcome our companions to share with us their insights on gathering together in his name, let us listen to a prayer by Pope Francis and then spend some time in silence as we listen to and pray with Veni Sancte Spiritus.
We gather conscious of the spirit of wisdom moving in each of us, as in all people since the beginning of human life. May we be wise in our sharing, ready to listen, open to learning wherever new insights and knowledge may take us, as we draw on the wisdom that stands the test of time. May we be courageous enough to discard whatever no longer sustains faith. We pray our gathering may allow the spirit of wisdom to be expressed here as graciously and as clearly as is possible. Amen.
Just before I welcome and hand over to our companions for this evening, can I just remind everyone that if you have a question, a thought, a comment that you would like to share, please pop it into the chat throughout the evening, and then we can gather them together later on in our question and answer time. Okay, so please feel free to pop in whatever thoughts, suggestions you have. Can I welcome, it's my great pleasure tonight to welcome Kevin, Nicholas and Valerie. They will introduce themselves and who they are as they present. But it's a great pleasure. We're delighted to have you here. You are companions with us, but friends to this network and with us usually during sessions. So please, I'm going to hand over right now to Nicholas. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa. And thank you, everybody. As I've certainly said before, when I've enjoyed coming on to SLN gatherings, it's a privilege to be here. It's a wonderful gathering that over the months and years you are putting together, and it's an honor to be here. And it's an honor to be here with two friends, with Valerie and with Kevin. And when we were preparing this beforehand, we were saying, well, what did they do at the Feast of Cana? They said, well, you should keep the best wine till the end, and you've served it first. Well, we do the starting with the worst wine, quite definitely this time. And then I shall speak for a while, and then I'll hand over to Kevin, and then Valerie will conclude it, and then hopefully we will try to answer the questions as we go along. So if you just bear with me for a moment, and hopefully I can bring up a PowerPoint. Well, the subject for this evening, can everybody see it, by the way? Is that clear? Okay. The subject is the experience of seeking the Spirit in small groups. And very definitely we feel that this is something that is both significant and very important. And we want to share our experiences and our enthusiasm. We share an enthusiasm for working and being together. Language is very important, isn't it? And I was using the term sharing in small groups. Really, it should be sharing in small communities, because that's what we're about. So that it's about community sharing, and community sharing with the followers of Jesus is always Spirit-led. So where is the Spirit leading us today? Well, in a sense, the prayer that we have begun with from Pope Francis gives us a clue, because Pope Francis has said on numerous occasions that we're living not so much in an era that is changing. Certainly there are changes, but he puts it more strongly and says that what we're experiencing is a complete change of era, which is significantly different, that we're at one of those points in the history of humankind when things are changing, not just dramatically, but quite significantly. And obviously Pope Francis is encouraging us in terms of heading for a church, creating a church that is synodal. And for a synodal church to be authentic, it must be radical. And sometimes when we think about this, certainly I feel that the change of era is such a big subject that it's a bit overwhelming, and I feel mentally overwhelmed. So we need encouragement. So what we see ourselves as doing this evening is simply talking out of our experiences, hopefully to encourage those of you who are similarly experiencing it, and perhaps encourage some who are a little bit hesitant to risk exploring a little bit further. So to begin with, I thought I would share with you a promise that comes from the Old Testament. I'm going to talk of the background of why small groups are important, and then Kevin will speak out of his experience in his particular group, and then Valerie will speak out of her particular group. But this first part is about the background. What is it that makes small groups an important aspect? Not the only aspect, but an important aspect of this era of change. And a prophet that's not very popular, not looked at an awful lot, it's only a very short prophecy, Habakkuk's prophecy, but there's a beautiful little passage in it in chapter 2, which you may be familiar with, where the prophet describes himself as saying, I'm like a sentinel. I stand on my watchtower. I take up my post as prophet, and I ask and wait to see what God is saying to me. And then beautifully, he claims the Lord sees me and the Lord responds to me. And this is what God says: write this vision down so it can easily be read. Easily read. It's a vision just for you, now in your time. It will not deceive. It will be fulfilled. There's something wonderfully consoling, I find, in that God's saying, yes, you're at a particular time, Habakkuk, and perhaps God is saying the same to us. And God is giving us a vision, not always easy for us to easily read, and a vision that will be fulfilled. And he ends his little encouraging words with, if it seems slow in coming, wait, patience, it will come without fail. So I thought I'd just begin with that and say that, you know, that program that's on Radio 4, the long view, well, God takes the long view, and God takes the long view in terms of things are happening over God's time. But that doesn't mean to say that God isn't with us and isn't speaking to our particular needs at the moment. And perhaps in the enthusiasm that is developing about small community sharing, that's one of the signs of what God is saying to us. So we have to be patient and wait and have courage. So what I want to do now, just briefly, is to show you two images. They're images of what I feel is the example Jesus gives in the New Testament that lead to small community sharing. There are many, many examples. I've just picked out two that stand out for me. And the first one I illustrate with this beautiful sculpture. It's a fountain. You may have seen it. It's in the cloister in Chester Cathedral. I'm not quite sure who the sculptor was. I suspect somehow it was a woman. But it shows that beautiful coming together of the woman at the well and Jesus asking for water in chapter 4 of John's Gospel. So from two strangers that never met before to becoming, in fact, a friend. And what begins with the personal leads to community. Because as you remember from the chapter of John's Gospel, the disciples had gone away to buy food in the town, and they return and find Jesus talking to this woman. And they're surprised, typical, particularly as he's talking to a woman, because that was unfortunately at times the attitude that some women were the attitude of men to some women. And none of them ask, why is he talking to her? But the woman isn't particularly interested in them. She's interested in Jesus. And they've had their initial conversation. So she puts down her water jar. Presumably she'd given him a drink of water and hurried back to the town to tell the people, come and see what she is discovering. And in a sense, that's what happens next. She says to the people, come and see. Her words prompted them to come to him, and they begged him to stay. My friend who took these photographs in Chester Cathedral, she took a whole series of them. And I liked this one because there are two bystanders who didn't know they were going to be on a photograph and certainly didn't know they were going to be part of a PowerPoint presentation. But in a sense, they sort of summarize for me the fact that something is so attractive about the fact of two people authentically meeting. And in that sense, they then come together and they ask him to stay. He stayed for 2 days and many more came to believe in him. It's complex, isn't it, how people do come together? And the whole answer is in recognizing that in sharing humanly, we begin to share something deep within ourselves. And is that, in a sense, what the incarnation is about? If we share with sensitivity and mutual respect, and we recognize the complexity of listening to one another and encouraging and questioning, we gain in confidence and we begin to take responsibility. So I feel that this is one of the beautiful ways in which this particular encounter between the woman at the well and Jesus makes us think about small gifts, the small gift of ourselves, which is the greatest gift of all in friendship. The apostles, they said to the woman, now we no longer believe, the friends from the town, because he'd stayed with them for 2 days. Now we no longer believe because of what you have told us, because we have now heard him for ourselves. And is that always going to be at the heart of every small community gathering? It begins with the personal. Each one of us brings our own relationship into that gathering, and we begin to share. And somehow or other, the sharing between us deepens the relationship between ourselves and God, and also deepens our relationship with one another. And this is a second, different image. And again, you may know the picture. It's by the Spanish artist Velázquez. And I think this is in the National Museum in Dublin. And it's a beautiful picture, I think, because it shows, you can see that the woman in the foreground is obviously preparing or serving a meal, but through the hatch, or some people say it's a mirror that you can see reflected, but I think it's a hatch, a kitchen hatch, where she can keep an eye on the people in the restaurant. And there are 3 people sitting around a table. You only really see 2 of them. You see the hand of one of them on the left, but there are in fact 3, and you can guess that what it is a picture, a very imaginative picture of that inn in Emmaus. And the serving woman is obviously listening to the conversation that's going on there. And if you remember the background, the 2 disciples had been walking along totally dispirited because everything had gone wrong. The whole dream that they'd had been ruined. And the stranger meets them. And gradually, as the conversation develops, even though they're a little bit slow, he begins to open the scriptures to them. And they persuade him to come and sit down. And it's in the breaking of the bread that they recognize him. And I think this is a beautiful way of showing how again, conversation is happening. She wasn't really supposed to be in on it, and yet she's listening. And something is there's a dynamic between what's happening around the table and her. For me, that's a real image of the small gathering, small community gathering that happens when people come together in the name of Jesus. And of course, we know what happened, that after the broken bread with Jesus, he seemed to disappear. And the 2 of them immediately feel the dreams come back. And what do? They go back to tell the others. So personal relationships develop into small community gatherings. You may, if you're familiar with this picture, you may also be familiar with a beautiful poem that Denise Levertov wrote about it. If I could just share a little bit of it, it's sorry, I've missed one there. It's called The Maidservant, and she's describing what this young woman is feeling and hearing. I'll just read this couple of verses from it. She listens, holding her breath. Surely that voice is his, the one who had looked at her once across the crowd, as no one ever had looked, had seen her, had spoken as if to her. Those who had brought this stranger home to their table don't recognize yet with whom they sit, but she in the kitchen, absently touching the wine jug she's to take in, a young black servant intently listening, swings round and sees the light around him and is sure. And for me, that the painting, coupled with Denise Levertov's insight, is at the heart of what we're saying that small community gatherings are about. They can take many forms, many different forms, and we'll be talking about some of the different forms that we've experienced. But at its heart, it's surely about this coming together of Jesus and those of us who believe in him, and then sharing that in whatever way we wish to and whichever way we can with one another. So I'll just finish now with some questions that in a way stay in my mind that we need to think about, because what we're talking about is Pentecost. On the day of Pentecost, they all met in one room. Well, all was apparently a relatively small community. And suddenly they heard what sounded like a powerful wind. And the rest of the Acts of the Apostles is the story of them trying to come to terms with the fact that Jesus was with them. They'd seen him before. They'd walked with him. They'd shared meals with him. And then he's gone. But is he gone? He's back with them, perhaps in a different way. So small community growth, is it for us a fresh benchmark in this new era, thinking of Habakkuk and Pope Francis? Do we as Catholics tend to think of the benchmark of belonging to the church as, well, which large parish do you belong to? And that is one way of measuring how we belong to the church. But do we need to begin to think of a new benchmark where small community growth is also? So instead of saying, which parish do you belong to? Perhaps we should begin saying, tell me about the small group that you're part of, small community that you're sharing with. And it would change the way we begin to. It's not a competition. It's not saying that one is right and another is wrong, but it is asking the question in a different way. And then we need to think about, how do we see the balance between small and larger spirit-led community? It was Teilhard de Chardin who had that famous phrase that you'll all know: unity differentiates, union differentiates. So we're together, but we're also different. And it's respecting both the union and the difference that is part of the ongoing discernment that these questions about small community belonging sort of raise in my mind. And I had a friend, Father Austin, who I lived with for many years, and he was a great one for coming out with sayings. And one of the ones he used to say regularly was learning to combine two crucial human roles. And in his view, they were the role of undertaker and the role of midwife. In other words, do we know, are we ready to know it when something or some situation has come to its natural end, and lay it to rest with respect? But much more important as well is, are we midwives ready to see where new life is coming and ready to welcome it and nurture it? So I think, again, that is a question that comes up when we start thinking about this, in inverted commas, new benchmark of small community gatherings. And finally, how do we discern the essential key question that's often lurking, I put it in brackets, behind our other seemingly simpler questions? I don't know about you, but sometimes we get very enthusiastic about something, and I sometimes suspect that in getting enthusiastic about it, I'm probably missing the point, and there's a deeper question somewhere underneath. So what is the question behind the question? That's another thought that perhaps might help us in our ongoing discernment. And one of the things that Kevin, I'm going to hand over to Kevin now in a moment, but what Kevin and Valerie and I want to do when Valerie completes hers is to talk about how we help one another, perhaps with a process. Do we need to help in our encouragement of one another in facing this new era, and in encouraging one another to explore the value and the benefits of belonging in small communities? So I will finish now, and thank you for listening, and hand over to Kevin.
Well, hello everyone. It's nice to be here with you all, and thanks to Nicholas. I'm just going to share my screen. So Nicholas spoke about the whys to start small groups or community gatherings. I do like the name community gatherings over groups, but we'll use them. We'll use both. What I'm going to do is just to share the experience of a small community gathering that we have down here in Portsmouth, down in the south coast of England. We meet face to face. We used to meet once a month. We now meet every 2 weeks. And we started about a year and a half ago. Basically, 2 simple rules: all are welcome. No subject is off the table. But first, I want to explain, but how did I get here now? Why did we start this community gathering? And first, I want to say, I'm sure many of you here today are probably not that happy with the state of the Catholic Church. Would like things to be very different, and don't see it really heading in a good way. And often we see the 2 options. I can go, as many of us have. We've just walked sorry, I'm going to go back. Or we can stay compliantly. And many of us do that as well. I don't want to hear about the bad stuff. I just want to go to Mass on Sunday, listen to what Father says, obey all the rules, and then go home. So is it just those two options, those two extremes? Well, there's more than that. So I don't have to choose between staying Christian compliantly or leaving Christianity defiantly. I can stay defiantly. I can intentionally, consciously, resolutely refuse to leave as I am. But with equal intention and resolution, I can refuse to comply with the status quo. So I can occupy Christianity with a different way of being Christian. And here we'll link into the small community gatherings. So I stay. It's not just a take it or leave it digital option in or out. Now I'm a member, I forgot in my introduction, I'm a member of, core member of the Root and Branch organisation. And in this organisation, we have what we call this 80-20 rule. So we all want the church to change, don't we? I'm sure like we do. But if you put 100% of your effort into changing an institution that doesn't seem really willing to change, knocking on that big heavy door, it doesn't seem to be opening, doesn't end up very well. You can end up feeling very frustrated. So we say, well, put 20% of your effort into that, into dialoguing with the institution, still hoping, we still need to hope it will change, but let's just put 20% of our time and effort to there. Let's keep our door open. But how about if we put 80% of our effort into just building that church that we want to see? As far as I can see, it's our church. It's not their church. It's our church. So let's see what we can do to build it. But again, how did it all start? Back to that question. I think it's, when somebody comes to talk to you, I think it's always interesting to see where they're coming from. And I need to take you back to 2021. I was in a bit of church-wise, not faith-wise, let's say church-wise, was not in a good way. I had worked for the Catholic Church for just under 4 years in the diocese and loving the frontline work, but actually the working inside the diocese, it's not a healthy place. It's rather, let's just say, toxic. So as somebody said, you need to get out of this toxic relationship, abusive relationship, which was kind of given a push because in seeing things you're not supposed to see, sailors are not supposed to go into the engine room, from what I heard. Well, I was in the engine room, and I know I understand where that place comes from, but challenging the system led to investigations. And so anyway, I left, but then being very despondent about the Catholic Church. Where do I go now? It's been part of my whole life. And then I heard about this organisation called the Root and Branch. And they were having this meeting in Bristol. Well, it's not too far from Portsmouth. I booked 2 nights in a hotel and I went along. Totally different. Found out the magic words. It's not just me. It isn't just me that thinks like this. I'm not alone. This is good. From what I experienced there, it was just an opening, a big new door opened onto new things. That feeling of having people that just think something the same, also wanted the church to change and were doing something about it. But I thought, so great conference, great speakers, which are on our website. But now what? What do we do after this? After Bristol was over. So in November 2021, a few of us down here in Portsmouth who were at the conference, either in person or online, we said, we can't just stop here. We need to keep things going. So that's when we started our small community gathering, our small group down here in Portsmouth. And we just called it DIY groups, which I think is a nice name, DIY for obvious reasons, do it yourself, build the church we want to see. So we call them root and branch DIY groups. All of what you want, of course. So we've been going since November of 2021, about 18 months now. So that's how we got going. And it's been good coming together in a small group. We were about 8 to 13. That's about the range of people, to talk about life and faith and social action, church reform. It is so life-giving. I leave every single meeting feeling just enriched, very much, incredibly enriched, just by coming together. People are made to come together. We are made to connect with each other. There's a whole area of psychology called object relations, which is just about that. It says people are made to come together. It's the major objective, the major motivating force in life, just to connect. So here we have the divine meeting the human, the psychological. So where are we now after 18 months coming together? We meet every few weeks at home, but we are a face-to-face group. It could be an online group. Valerie will speak about that in a few minutes. And what do? Well, we have a kind of a structure. You know, we always have an introductory prayer, probably a reading. But then here comes the good part, a discussion topic. Now, a different person prepares each week. You don't have the leader talking about the discussion topic each week. A different person from the group will choose what they want to speak about. And that's the main part of the group. It takes up most of the time, which is about an hour and a half that we meet for, and then a final prayer. So a different person chooses, and then they prepare the next session. So what will be talked about? There's endless topics to talk about. We've spoken about, as you can see here, LGBT, why I stay. That was a very interesting one. Why I stay. Ask questions. You don't always get answer, but asking questions was good. Discernment. We've looked at videos, the root and branch videos, right, and spoken about them. And then where to go on from here after a year and a half? So next meeting that we're having, and well, it's actually next week, is to discuss, after a year and a half, it's time for a review. We want to think, well, what actually are we? Well, we are a community. We have grown in trust of each other, and that's very special to see, like people just coming together, grow in trust of each other. Are we just a discussion group, or are we a new way of being church? We're trying to decide what exactly are we? I actually think that we are like a little church in ourselves, still connected to the main church. We still retain that connection. So we're going to discuss that. Do we break bread together? This is a very interesting thing. I mean, for me, it's Jesus says, "Do this in memory of me." As far as I can remember, I don't think Jesus says male ordained, ontologically different male men do this in memory of me. So I think, what's the problem? We haven't quite got there yet, but it remains a question. Do we break bread together? The other question is, how are we connected to the larger church parish? We just started this group by ourselves. We didn't ask Father, can we please start this group? Would you like to come along and lead us? We just went off and did it, which I think we have the right to do. But how are we retaining that link into the parish? Does the parish even know we're doing it? So this is another question we will be asking. And we will be talking about social action, not as a group social action, but what are we doing individually? Because we realize we have to reach out into the local community. This has to be an important part of the group, of the gathering. So just to repeat, what do I mean by this DIY group? Quite simply, it's just being the church that we want to be. We're in charge. We can decide, and we're coming together for reasons of faith. So what's the problem? And so one of the best ways of doing, just being the church you want to see, is this. Just create or join a small community gathering. But how do you do it? You know, it can seem like a very daunting threshold for someone who's never done it before. How do you do it? Actually, it's not difficult. It is quite easy, but Root and Branch, we have a template which you can use if you are interested to get you going, which is on the website, or we can email you a copy of that. It's like a DIY guide of a DIY group. So being in a community gathering, it brings us together. We share faith, we share our lives, we talk about our lives. Can't do that in the church on a Sunday. We talk about social action, church reform. To repeat again, all are welcome. No subject is off the table. And we are made for relationships. And small community gatherings give us a chance to create new things and to grow in community. Regarding the template, this is just a picture of what you can download that shows you how to get going. If you do start one, please let us know. It's just a 3-page document, and in it you will see what we do, which is listed here: prayer, reading, discussion topic, perhaps breaking bread together, and so on. But it's just a starter guide. You know, groups must be set up in the way that you want it. There is nothing prescriptive here. It's very descriptive. So I shall end here, and hopefully some of you out there will think about maybe trying to start your own groups. And we'll talk about this a little bit later after Valerie's talk. So I'll now hand over to Valerie.
Good evening, everybody. It's wonderful to be here with you. As I'm going to mainly talk about cyberspace, I need to tell you that I'm sitting here very comfortably in my lounge in Liverpool, about 10 miles north of Liverpool. First of all, I'd like to thank SLN for inviting us to make this presentation. I'd like to compliment them as being outstanding in the work they're doing for the church, for the ecclesia. And I'd also like to give very much credit to Root and Branch for the work they're doing, especially with setting up small groups. I'm privileged, of course, to work with Kevin and Nicholas this evening. It's been great fun planning this together. And I'm honoured to tell you about our small Christian community. Let us begin. So I'd like you to meet. A moment, let me just get rid of a sidebar. I hadn't realised that was going to come up. Right, there we are. First of all, the whole group nature has been planned between us all that have met. Everybody's had a sort of finger in the pie. And we decided we needed to have some patrons, have people we could look to for inspiration. And we chose Prisca and Aquila. If you haven't met them before, try Acts 18 and try Wikipedia. We'll tell you lots about them. We're a small community in cyberspace, in the Catholic tradition, but we welcome everybody. And I just want to run through, really, how we came to be and where we are now. How did I come to be facilitating a small community? Well, there was no intention at all to run a small community. I'd looked at the Root and Branch website and they'd got their communities there, and I'd looked at the list and I thought, well, no, it's a lovely idea, but it's not really for me. So was it by accident? Or did the Holy Spirit have something to do with it? I was at a Zoom meeting about starting small groups, and there was a long silence at the end. There was no volunteers. And whether it was the Holy Spirit or just my ego, heaven only knows. But at the end, I decided to put my email in the chat. And I thought, well, nobody's going to contact me, so it's quite a safe thing to do. But lo and behold, wonderful people contacted me. So we were on the way. And our principle is no questions asked, all are welcome. The aim is to become the ecclesia God wants us to be. So we have weekly meetings by Zoom, but we also communicate through a Google group. Simply put, but I'll explain later if you ask the question, it means you can communicate to everybody by using just one email address. Everybody can read it. It's very, very useful, is to keep in touch with people. A lot of things are possible using digital technology. And I'm a bit of a nerd, so as many of you who know me know that. So we use the lectionary readings as a foundation, but they're not set in stone. Another principle is all are called and gifted. So we share and use all the gifts, talents, and skills that are in the group. And my goodness, have they appeared? I wouldn't have believed it at the outset. I would just mention the alternatives to Zoom are Google, Skype, or MS Teams. Zoom, of course, requires a contribution each year, which might not be possible for everybody, but Google is free, Skype is free, and MS Teams comes with Microsoft, but it's worth exploring. So these people contacted me. What happened? 6 people joined me. We shared decisions about the way forward. We talked about what we might do, what we mightn't do. And I think one of the things that I certainly felt, and I think my companions felt as well, is if we just have a group to moan about what's wrong in the institution, we're not going to go anywhere. So we tried 3 different formats. That's with the lectionary readings. First of all, we tried a straight liturgy of the word, starting with the penitential rite, going through the readings, ending with the and a discussion of them, and then ending with our prayers you might want to make. Then we tried Lectio Divina. Then we tried, well, how about just having the readings and reflecting on them and sharing how we feel, how we think about them. And wonderfully, the numbers increased week by week. Until now, we've got 15 companions with about 6 to 10 sharing each week. And I'll just emphasize again, the Google group comes into its own because we've got a couple of companions undergoing medical treatment. And we've got another elderly gentleman who wants to be with us but can't join us on Tuesdays. We've got somebody else who's got something else on at the moment on a Tuesday. So we can include them as well in what we're doing. And there's lots of discussion goes on with the Google group. As I say, Tuesday evening wasn't convenient to everybody, but Google group keeps all in touch. And we discovered invaluable skills, gifts and skills among us. I can't accentuate that enough. So the basic format of our weekly meeting, and you can see all the gears in the background, it all meshes in together. And I think I'd say we as companions all link in together and share. So first of all, we start with a greeting. Then we have an opening prayer, and it could well be, then it might be a video to aid reflection, or it might be some music. Then we have the first reading. Well, of course, we can use PowerPoint, so this is displayed on screen. After the first reading, we have some silence, maybe for 2 or 3 minutes, so people can reflect on the reading, think about it. And then we have some sharing. It could be simply sharing a word that strikes us. It might be a phrase, or somebody might launch in with taking a sentence and talking about that and how it talks to them. After the responsorial psalm, which again is a video, we have the second reading. And we do the same. We have silence and we talk it through. And that's omitted if the time is pressing. In other words, if we found so much to say in the first reading, we're not likely to give the gospel a good going over, as you might say, then we miss out the second reading, the gospel. And then we finish with a closing prayer, which might well be a video of some sort. So as I say, nothing's set in stone. So it could be that one of our companions says, well, I'd like to do something next week or the week after, but it won't be quite this. Yes, fine, plan it, take it over, do it. We have had Maggie talking about Spirit Unbounded. We also had a whole evening where we all shared in the work to explore who Prisca and Aquila were. And another companion shared a Lenten prayer service with us. As I say, silence and reflection plays a key part in our meetings. And also the sharing, absolutely key. It's not a mass where you sit there in silence and listen to me or somebody else. Everybody comes in, everybody's important. And when we share the readings, we think, what's happening? The head work, the mental work, the intellectual work. And then we look at, what is it saying to me? What is it saying to my heart? And so, what's it inspiring me to do? Where am I going with this? What am I going to do with it? And we can't claim any credit for this. The Australian Diocese of Wollongong uses this with their faith circles. We have discussion, of course. And as I said earlier, offers to facilitate are very welcome. So I don't want to be in the hot seat every week. Prisca and Aquila companions say they value, and this is literally what has come up over the months in which we've been in existence. And by the way, we first met on the Feast of the All Saints, of course, last November. They like being known and appreciated. They like hearing the insights, the ideas, and the thoughts of others. They like being invited to question. You know, sometimes when we're looking at the gospel or one of the other readings, there's a sentence which doesn't make sense. I mean, in the last part of the second reading, I think it is this coming week, have a look about the deserving and the murdering and the thieves. We talked about that. You know, we don't deserve to be condemned for murder or anything else. And they say, well, is that actually giving Christians permission to murder and be deceitful? Of course it isn't. And one of our members set us really well on the right path with that. They appreciated having a voice. They appreciated that each person contributes to the whole. we do love keeping in touch with those people who cannot attend. And also, especially our people who are not too well, it's just, by an email, people drop in there and say, we're thinking of you, we're walking beside you. It's so important. And the idea that we're supported and we're nurtured, we're growing. I know I'm growing. Exploring the readings, and somebody definitely said this, exploring the readings adds value to the Sunday celebration of Word and Eucharist. And finally, one of our members, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, wrote this to us all, and I think it just says where we are. And it's from Geraldine. Our group has been a place where others have found the courage and trust to share, and that is the wonder of this group. I hope you found that useful. And I'll hand back to Callum, I think.
It's back to me now. Back
Yeah.
to me now. Valerie, I've got a few more slides to share,
Rose.
and then it's back to Callum. So thank you, Valerie. Very lot to think about there. I think we can see there's many ways of doing groups, right? There are countless ways. Our way is with discussion groups, and Valerie's way, lectio, and Davina. There's someone here with us today, Sue Williamson, who's part of a group, and they study a book. I'm actually part of another group here as well, where I'm living, and we do that, right? We've taken one of the books of Richard Rohr, and we study a chapter a month of that. So many ways of doing this. Anyway, I'll go on. So what's the next step to this meeting today? There may be some of you out there who are at this meeting this evening, who might be thinking, well, I'd like to do this. I would like to start a small community gathering. But how do you do it? Right. As I mentioned before, it can seem like quite a big threshold to get over. So if there are any of you out there who would like to start a group, who are seriously thinking about starting a small group, small community gathering, there are two organisations, Scottish Laity Network and Root and Branch, are offering a series of 4 meetings in June to help you, right, to come together on 4 Sundays in June, 1 hour, on the dates as you can see on your screen, just to talk. Right? How do we do this? How do we support each other to get these groups going? And maybe that threshold that looks quite high will not seem as high after these meetings. So if you are interested, we would hope that you would agree to attend all 4 meetings. We're going to limit the number to 12. It can't be a big meeting. It will be online, of course, and we will come along. The 3 of us will be there. And we don't come as experts, but we come as fellow travellers in this journey. So that's something to think about. I'll give an email address at the end. So if you would like to join us on this new journey during June, to start small groups, then please contact us at the email address, which I will give you on the next slide. I'm going to end here, hoping that you will think about starting a group. I'm sure you can see the benefit we have got from it. And I sincerely hope that all of you out there can experience what I've experienced through our community gatherings. Let me just end on this. This is something written by Peter McVery, who's a Jesuit in Ireland. It's really worth looking him up on Google. He has recorded a talk And it's very interesting. We all ask ourselves this question, don't we? Where have all the young people gone? Huh? Where have all the young people gone? We've all got our theories, right? And the bishops sit in the palaces dreaming one day that young people are going to come walking into the churches again. Well, I think we know where that dream is going, don't we? But there are other reasons there. But Peter McVerry talks about this, and he answers this question in this recording that you can see online. And he says, the church of the future in Ireland will be composed of little groups that come together to pray, to celebrate the Eucharist together, and to reach out to those in need. This was a talk that he gave to the Association of Catholics in Ireland on this topic. So anyway, I will end here. And if you are interested to join our 4 Sunday meetings, please contact us at this email address here, slatinetwork@gmail.com. Okay, thank you. I'll now hand back to Callum.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you to you all for just that sharing and that offering to us. Let me just let me bring everybody together here. Here we are. And just really give everybody a moment to pause and to consider any questions that they might have, any thoughts that they might have on anything that you've shared with us tonight, Kevin, Valerie, Nicholas. Because there's so much that we could dive into there. There's so much that we could unpick and so much that we want to unpick. I wonder, Valerie, if I could come to you just on a practical question, almost because you invited it yourself by saying maybe someone will ask me about it. Because I must admit, even as I'm sitting here, using all sorts of different technology for work and for groups, I've never come across Google Groups. So maybe you could say a bit about them.
I didn't quite catch that, Callum. Can you repeat it?
I'm just wondering if you could tell us a bit about Google Groups. I've never come across that one.
Oh, Google Groups. Well, it's run by Google, as the name says, and you go on to their website, you set up a group. It's fairly easy to do. Anybody who wants to do it, I can help them. I'm quite happy to help them. Once you've put all the names of the people who are in the group in there, and obviously you've got their permission to put their names there, it just means that everybody can share messages. So anybody can write into the group, anybody can reply to the group, but you only use one email address. The danger with using a list of emails is that you tend to drop people off by accident. And then, of course, they're no longer connected. So it's a secure way of connection. It also means, as far as data protection is concerned, if somebody no longer wants to belong to the group, they've got the facility to unsubscribe themselves. They don't have to tell you they don't want to belong to your group anymore, which saves embarrassment all round. So it is a good means. I'm sure that other people have things like WhatsApp groups and so on, which, yeah, I've never really explored, although I use it. So no, I love Google Groups. They work very well.
From what you're saying, that would be one of the big differences from something like WhatsApp, that, if I start a WhatsApp group, then I can see everyone else's phone number. And so it's that kind of data protection element that's quite good as well. Yeah.
Now, on Google Groups, you don't actually know, well, you can set it whether other people would know the address of the person that sent the message, or whether, you don't give that information. So there's quite a lot of switches you can use to protect privacy one way or another.
Now, Kevin, there was a comment earlier that I can't see now, but that spoke about how we can create such small communities even when we have this kind of the challenge that's presented by a very, very rural community, where it can be geographically disparate. And I know that we've explored some of the online options, but I wonder if you might say a bit more about the struggle that can face, but also the opportunities that can grow out of that.
So you're asking for somebody in a more rural location to do that. I mean, I can only offer the online method of doing that. Right? I think this is where online comes into its own in some way for people who are not able to get close to other like-minded people. So apart from that, I don't really have much to offer there. Just online, I think. Nicholas wants to come in and add something here. Nicholas, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, it's one of the many challenges that we face in terms of this new benchmark. How do we marry the internet, the online approach, and as compared with our face-to-face meeting? And undoubtedly, if you're meeting face-to-face, it's much more real, it's much more human, it's much more normal. The group that I belong to, which began in 2009, so it's been going a long time, initially always met face-to-face. Now that meant that we had to be relatively close to one another. We were in the Liverpool area, and we had to have a space to meet and all the things that go with that. Subsequently, through circumstances, we weren't able to do that. And also other people joined us who were living a distance away. So it is certainly internet or face-to-face, but another term, a middle term, is hybrid. Because there's no reason why a group that normally meets online couldn't, on special occasions, arrange to sort of come together perhaps for a residential overnight or for a day spent together. So it's coming back to the point that we've made before, that there are infinite number of ways of actually facing this, and it's only when you get a practical challenge such as this one is that you're then forced to think, well, how could I be creative on this?
Valerie.
Yes, it's interesting. I was pondering this earlier, this idea of sort of the closeness in the group. And funnily enough, we are extremely close and extremely good friends, but we've never met each other physically. And the other thing is that 2 of our members are in the United States, and another member who is just part of the Google group, doesn't join us on Zoom, is in Australia. The reason he doesn't join us on Zoom is because he'd have to get up about 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning to do so. And that's a little bit of a big ask. But yeah, I mean, it does mean on Zoom that you can pick up people from all over the place. And I mean, similarly in the UK, we're everywhere.
I think that's such an important point, and that the options that you've explored with us tonight give us that thought process of how we can appeal to and reach out to as many people as possible. We've got another question here that asks, how do we reach out to people in the local community? The questioner says, I no longer attend my local parish, which I was very involved in, and I worry it would look like I was in competition with them. Nicholas, maybe I could start with you.
Well, again, that's sort of hitting the nail on the head, because you're immediately faced with this dilemma. And if we're open to the accusation, if you're in a small community gathering, so I say, oh, well, you think you're special, do you? Or you're an elitist group, or you're a closed group. So there's all those issues to be thought of. And then, are you being disloyal in terms of the larger parish grouping? That's another whole area. And in a sense, the question that is just being asked brings another dimension, and that is those who don't belong either to the larger parish or to the small group. So you're talking about a vast number of people who don't want to be associated with a particular denomination, but have got a spiritual hunger to actually engage in this sort of way. In the group that I belong to, we chose a name. I think what name you call it is very important, and it can change, of course, because if your name is too specific, it will automatically dissuade some who don't want to come. On the other hand, if it's not in some way specific, it sounds too vague. So we used a poem of R.S. Thomas. I'm a great fan of R.S. Thomas, the poet, and he's written a poem called The Porch. And in it, he describes going to Lockie's little country church one night, and it's in winter. And he was a dreamer. He was a poet, for goodness sake, and a prophet. And he finds himself, he remembers sort of locking the church door, but then just standing there. And he's written this beautiful poem, which ends in sort of saying, well, was I in church or was I out of church? And when we were first setting up, we decided we wanted something like that. We didn't want to be either in, but neither did we want to be out. So we've called it the vestibule, which is an unusual name. It's not a normal name. And the reason we called it that was so that, in a sense, we epitomize this in-between, so that you, of course, you can belong within the church and be a fully committed, active member in whatever way is appropriate, or you can be outside. Now, again, it's coming back to language and having to think through. This is not a simple organizational matter. It's pushing us to ask theological questions at a deeper level, just as Jesus did in the scriptures.
I wonder, just taking that idea a bit further about these small groups, do we have a sense of how many of these small kind of ecclesial groups there are? And you know, I'm looking at a comment here that says, I suspect there are a number of groups that meet under different headings but don't see themselves as small church or ecclesial type groups.
Maybe I can take that one. You know, Root and Branch has been promoting this, right, for quite some time, and we know where some groups are located, but I have to be honest and say how many there actually are, we don't know. So what we're trying to do, right, we hope to have it sometime soon, is a map, right, just as our UK map, and there will be groups that we know of where you can click on and contact him. And we're hoping groups that haven't actually made themselves a bit more public might get in touch and get themselves on this map, so we can start to build up a kind of a list of how many small community groups there are actually out there. But at the present time, I have to say, I don't really know. It would be good to know. Sorry, Valerie, would you like to add something?
Yes. Back in the early 2000s, Westminster Diocese had this idea themselves, and they were going to set up small groups within parishes to meet. And I've been tracking it because somebody alerted me to the fact. And there must be one or two hidden away, and we don't know about them. But in the main, the whole idea didn't take off. And I mean, when I look at my parish, I wouldn't even go there. I wouldn't even start to think about a small group because there just isn't the interest, or that's how it comes over to me. I'm sure there is, but of course nobody talks about it and nobody shares in a parish situation.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there are lots out there. It would be lovely to know about them.
Yeah, one problem, I mean, I honestly believe there are people out there that would love to join a small group like this. And I have to say, right, the group we have down in Portsmouth, there are many of us are not regular church attenders. There are some that never go to church, but they get a great deal out of this small group, right? I think the challenge is how to reach these people, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're a mixture. We've got some people who do go to Mass every week and minister in their parishes. And we've got other people who are totally alienated. And it's the coming together and the answering questions. We've got people who have been very damaged by the church, not sexually, but damaged. And it's sort of helping them see that things are different, really, especially in a small group.
I'm interested in this discussion of trying to set up small groups, but within a parish context as well, Valerie. And as much as, you know, you've spoken about an example where that didn't work, I wonder if you can think of a way where, if there are individuals on the call who have more of an open door in their parish than others, how that could work or how that could be effective. I'm thinking of, you know, we've spoken before about priests who've tried prayer partners and things like that. And I'm wondering if you see these as positive initiatives.
I think maybe I'm answering the question but obliquely. I think if the pastor is willing to have small groups and encourage small groups and actually can allow parishioners their heads, shall we say, so that they actually can get on with it, small groups in a parish might work very well. I mean, for anybody who's read the series Rebuilt by Michael White and Tom Corcoran, it's a parish in Maryland in the United States. And they went to the parish, and it was really probably like most of our parishes, a bit dead in the water. And finally, they decided that they'd got to do something about it. So one of the first things they did was set up small groups and say to parishioners, you all need to be part of a small group, so you matter, so you can talk. Well, they have gone from being a dying parish to having to rebuild because they don't have enough room to hold their congregation or their meeting. I mean, it's a wonderful website to look at. And their mass attendance each week, albeit it's in America, is 1,000, plus young people, children, the whole gambit. So, if it happens in a parish, the pastor has courage to encourage it, I think it would take off.
Nicholas, there are some important points on this theme coming through in the chat as well. And I just want to take a couple of comments and share them with you and get your response. One says, I agree about not being able to find like-minded people in my parish. I wonder if they're there, but the church is so good at keeping us quiet so we don't connect. So that idea of how do we foster connection in a situation when it's not encouraged? And the second comment, and I'll hand over to you, it seems very important that we come as we are and find acceptance. My experience of parish groups is that it's not been okay to ask questions that challenge aspects of church teaching. So, this idea of can groups actually work in that environment? Of course they can't, but how do we challenge that idea of what's acceptable and what's not, this idea that it's not okay to ask that question? And how do we break through that barrier to the human connection? Nicholas?
Well, I think taking the second part first, like the human connection, it's wherever there is a human connection, that's the potential starting point. I think that the difficulty, if you remember when I was beginning the introduction, I was suggesting that the Pope is saying that we're not living in an era that is changing, but in a complete change of era. Now, if he's right, and I think he is, then that is a huge shift. It's a paradigm shift, as they would say, in terms of how we understand church, how we understand together as human beings, because this isn't just about the church. So many of the structures that we're all part of, secular and sacred, are not holding together in the way that they used to do, or the way that we thought they did. So it's a huge change that's happening. I think when there's such a huge change, we go back to the Habakkuk bit. We have to be patient. And I don't mean by that we don't do anything. That's not what I'm saying. But we have to recognize that it's going to be messy. So that you will find that there are situations where you have good leadership in a parish, whether it's coming from the priest or from wherever, and all sorts of imaginative things might be happening. But then you'll see a whole swathe of others where, for all sorts of reasons, it's not happening. So that's the mess, in inverted commas, that we're living in. So it's a matter of where do we put our energies? Touching back on what Kevin had said earlier, where do you put your 80%, as you're saying, this is where I'm going to concentrate, and where do you let go of where it's not happening? Now, that doesn't answer the question specifically. There isn't a silver bullet in that sense. But I think if we're committed to this ongoing journey, I mean, going back to my friend Austin, who was a bit of a rebel on all sorts of levels, some of you may remember Austin. And he used to say to me in the 40 years or so that we lived together, he says, do you really think that Jesus came to found a church? And he'd leave the question hanging. He says, do you not think he really came to start a movement that there was an actual movement in which human beings began to relate to one another in a new way, and in that relating to one another begin to discover the beauty of the God who's with us, which is basically the incarnation. Do we really believe in the incarnation? Because I suspect at times we don't. We get tied up in institutional type questions, all of which are important, but which in point of fact, it comes down to our human relationships with one another and how we then gradually help one another to grow in those human relationships. It ties in with what I was saying before about the midwife and the undertaker. Are we spending too much time worrying about the structures that are definitely not working, whereas there's life going on all around us? So people sometimes, I mean, there was it last week on SLM, was the wonderful presentation last week about loud fences. And in the small group I was in, somebody said, well, I've got a friend and he's been abused in the past. And over 10 years, I've tried to sort of keep on helping him and encouraging him. And he's no nearer coming back into church now than he ever was. But there's 10 years of his love and affection and concern shared between them. And we were saying to him, well, that is church. And we can't measure it by saying, well, does he actually? So I'm going on again too much. Once I get going, I can't stop. But I'm not really answering very clearly, Callum, the question. But I
think what's coming through though is the emotion, and I think that what's coming through most clearly in the chat tonight is emotion. And I think, as you've said yourselves, it's about acknowledging the hurt that's been done as well, and that's very raw in the chat tonight. And it's difficult to pick out any single bit, but really just to draw upon that idea that in kind of half-hearted efforts at what we've been talking about in a parish setting, there's been a lot of hurt. One image that really struck me as I skimmed through the chat there was of someone being regularly locked out of a meeting room. So the real depth of feeling in the chat. But I just wanted to draw on one final point before we conclude. And that's this. My experience as the person writing the comment of being in the Zoom group that Valerie facilitates is that the relationships are deeper than many face-to-face gatherings I've attended. It's a very spiritual and trusting context. And in my case, brings the spirituality deep within my home life too, since I feel I'm welcoming each of the group members into my home. The sense of the spirit in this group is more palpable and present to me than time spent in my local or indeed any parish church. And I suppose I just wanted to draw this kind of Q&A conversation to a close by saying that when I first sat on an SLM meeting and thinking back to the early meetings with Jim Martin and the likes, as I sat in a house that had no furniture yet because we'd just got the keys, and faces were just that, I certainly would never have thought a few years on that I would be coming on knowing people as friends. And I think that so many of us feel exactly what Kevin, Valerie, Nicholas, you've shared with us tonight, that real connection, that real feeling, that real emotion and friendship that is church, that brings us together in this forum. So thank you for sharing with us, and thank you to everyone who makes that possible. And so Rosa, I'm going to hand back over to you.
Thanks, Callum. Callum, you've just actually said exactly what was in my head and heart. Just to thank Nicholas, Valerie and Kevin. I think it's been inspiring, but it's been inspiring because of your authenticity and shared experience and the emotion that you have shared and that other people have in the chat. And also just to remember to everybody, this isn't just a one-off, but this is something we would like to progress with. And for those who are interested in continuing or seeking out ways of small groups and being church, then to take up on the invitation that we have here for those Sundays. Thank you so much. And if we can, we'd just like to say a prayer for you. Loving God, we thank you for the insight, wisdom and companionship of Kevin, Nicholas and Valerie. We thank you for their fidelity to the gospel message and their passion for accompanying those who seek to be authentic disciples of Jesus. And we ask that you continue to empower them with your Spirit. Amen. We now pray the prayer to the Holy Spirit written by our friend and companion, Diarmuid O'Murchu.
Come, Holy Spirit, breathe down upon our troubled world. Shake the tired foundations of our crumbling institutions. Break the rules that keep you out of our sacred spaces, and from the dust and rubble, gather up the seedlings of a new creation.
Come, Holy Spirit, inflame once more the dying embers of our weariness. Shake us of our complacency. Whisper our names once more, and scatter your gifts of grace with wild abandon. Break open the prisons of our inner being, and let your raging justice be our sign of liberty.
Inflame and lead us to places we would rather not go. Expand the horizons of our limited imaginations. Awaken in our souls dangerous dreams for a new tomorrow, and rekindle in our hearts the fire of prophetic enthusiasm.
Come, Holy Spirit, whose justice outwits international conspiracy, whose light outshines spiritual bigotry, whose peace can overcome the destructive potential of warfare, whose promise invigorates our every effort to create a new heaven and a new earth, now and forever.
Empowered by the Spirit, we continue the mission entrusted to us. Come, Holy Spirit, come. So, thanks everyone for joining us. What I'm sure we all agree has been a wonderful evening of sharing. And hope, and that's so important for us. We look forward to being with you next Thursday for the final evening of our Towards Pentecost 2023 Signs of the Spirit, embracing the cosmic Christ in creation and in the Eucharist with our companion Ilia Delio. During June, we are having 4 sessions reflecting on the Synodal journey, and we also hope you can join us and invite others to join us as well. And you can see on the screen that people who will be joining us during that time. To those who are leaving the meeting at this point, good night, God bless, and we invite you to log off. For those who wish to stay on and enjoy a breakout room, please stay connected, and in a few minutes we will generate the breakout rooms. Thank you, everyone.